Great, and I'll continue letting people through as they come. Welcome everybody to the conversation we're having today about recession proofing, and in fact, in our conversation leading into this, maybe we should be calling it future proofing your sponsorship program, and looking at how all the talk and everything else that's going on right now in media is affecting the sponsorship landscape. Really happy to have Maria Perez here for the Match Maven. And Brent Barutis from the partnership group, and it's just fantastic to have both of you here. You've been a wealth of information and insights to the conversation. And before I get started, I'm gonna plug our next session. So we're hosting a session on January 27th with Stephen Coakley from T1 Agency. And we're going to be looking at the metaverse, Web3, and what does that look like for sponsorship and brand engagement. So we'll be sending out some information on that following the call today. So happy to have you join us for that conversation. But first off, let me introduce Maria, and then we can introduce Brent. I'll let you introduce yourself, Maria.
Okay, hi, my name is Maria Perez, and I am a cause and social issues marketing practitioner. I coach, and I also do brokerage. I spend a lot of time in the cause space. So I am very excited to be here today to chat about the realities out there that I encounter every day and provide some counsel.
Great, and Brent?
Great. Thanks very much. Great to be on this panel with Maria and with you, Brad. And my name is Brent Barutis, and as Brad said, I'm with a company called Partnership Group Sponsorship Specialists, and we are a consultancy or an advisory firm based in Canada, working coast to coast in the country, helping, and we work on both sides of the fence. We do work with brands, with sponsors to help them to effectively engage in sponsorship, whether that's to help them build out opportunities and help match them with the right properties, or whether it's to help them to measure ROI or ideate on activation programs, etc. The core of our business, though, the bulk of it is on the property side, and we work with properties to help them to figure out what they actually have to sell, what the assets are worth, and how to properly take them to market. And we work with not-for-profits, charities, pro sports, amateur sports, municipalities, anybody that sells a sponsorship, whether they're large or small. We've got a lot of large clients, we've got a lot of small clients. So that'd be my background.
And you definitely got a good view of all sides of the fence going across the country, which is fantastic to have you here today. And just as an element for anybody who's on the call, feel free to put questions into the chat as we're going through. We've received a number of questions ahead of time. I think we're going to have tons to cover, but happy to jump in as you have thoughts and questions as they arise. But just to get started, I think there's been tons and tons of talk in media about the potential of an upcoming recession, and I think a lot of people question whether we're in it or not at the moment. But I guess I'll put up the opening question to both of you. Your conversations you're having with brands right now, what have you been experiencing in their feedback?
You want to start, Brent? Go ahead.
You go ahead, Maria.
I am finding that there is a certain amount of reticence, a certain amount of caution, holding back, because there's uncertainty. However, I mean, that just begs your need to conduct discovery more readily and to ask questions and to listen very carefully, because as things change and pivot, you need to be flexible and be responsive to those pivots. I think that's really the key. What do you think, Brent?
I would agree, Maria. I haven't actually heard anybody use the R word yet as an excuse or an objection on the brand side, but all of them have, are cautious in their businesses. And when their business is looking at the situation of the market and using your words, Maria, that it being unstable and it not being consistent, increasing inflation, increasing interest rates, those sorts of things, it affects their businesses. So their businesses are going to be affected in all their departments, whether that's their HR departments, whether it's their marketing and their sponsorship investment departments, whether that's operations, whether it's expansion, research and development, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be affected by it. So all of them are being cautious. And on the other side of that, we're still seeing lots of naming rights happen. We're still seeing a lot of deals being done. And through most recessions or periods of fluctuation, we still see business being done. And that means that if it's being done right, it'll get done. If it's not being done right, it won't.
And I think
Recession or not.
I think you have to borrow a page from the cause world. The term stewardship becomes paramount right now. You need to take care of your folks, right?
Yeah.
You always need to take care of them, but you need to provide value added and even more stewardship at this point, and be flexible and be prepared to offer things that you might not have offered before.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you've got, and those that know me know that we focus with our clients on getting them to build deeper relationships. And COVID was a perfect example. And I've had this discussion, ironically, in I think 4 different presentations in the last month, that what COVID gave us was deeper relationships with our partners. We had to talk to them more. Those that, were afraid, those properties that were afraid to go see the sponsor because, oh my gosh, they might want their money back because we're not holding the gala, or we're not doing the walk, or we're going virtual and nobody likes virtual. And oh my gosh, I'm just not going to call them. Those are the ones that lost money. And the ones that picked up the phone and said, hey, how are you doing? How are your staff doing? How has this pandemic affected you? And not asked about money and sponsorship and events, but built relationships. We're seeing so much more of that spin out post-COVID to the fact that those with deep relationships will survive. Those with deep relationships will continue to thrive through the next period, be that a recession or a bull market.
Well, and I think from a sales perspective, we were joking when we were preparing for this, that I had coined this phrase, discovery is key in 23, but I really mean that. I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because you're going to have to work it now. You're going to have to steward, you're going to have to call, you're going to have to listen in order to be responsive. And more than ever, you can't just walk in with your own assumptions or your own agenda. It's not going to work. And I say that as a practitioner, having closed a whole bunch of deals in the last 6 or 7 weeks, and having not really had to make concessions, but to really listen effectively as to what they're trying to achieve and what I could do to help them get there beyond what I've ever had to do before. What would you think? What would you say to that?
You know what? I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go back to Brad, because I know that you and I could have this conversation just like the two of us were having. And it could go for 2 hours right now. But I know, Brad, that you had a bunch of questions, and I want to make sure that your audience gets those questions answered that they asked you. And so why don't we jump over to those? Because I think our conversation, Maria, will continue, but at least we can answer those other questions at the same time.
I think that that stewardship element that you're talking about, Maria, is incredibly important, especially because coming on the heels of the pandemic, and Brent and I hosted a session, talking about how to deal with sponsorship in the pandemic, and I get the feeling that pandemic, recession, it doesn't matter. It's about the relationship between you and the partners, and understanding what the partners want, and I guess that's the element in a discovery meeting. People talk about discovery meetings, and maybe they don't know the key things to ask. Going a little off script from our initial questions, but I think it's pretty valuable. Like, do you have 2 or 3 things that you ask every partner when you're meeting with them?
Well, in our case, like when we work with our clients and we mentor them, or we're supporting with advisory services, it depends on which discovery session you're at, whether it's the first one or it's the 5th one or the 15th one. They'll all be different types of questions. But we try to encourage in the discovery to actually in the first ones, not to talk about, well, first of all, never talk about you. I always look at discoveries sort of like first dates. And when you go on that first date, if I'm sitting across from somebody and I talk constantly about myself, the odds of me getting that second date are probably pretty minimal. And the more you talk about yourself in that initial discovery session, the less they want to meet with you again. And your job isn't there to sell your product or your cause or your sports team or your golf tournament or anything else. It's there to learn about their goals, their objectives, and their business. So we always try to get our clients to start with not even talking about sponsorship, not even talking about the business side of it, but to talk about them. Like if you're sitting in front of somebody and you're in their office and they've got a big trout in the background hung against the wall, your first question might be, wow, are you a fisher person? Like, do you like fishing? And she might say, no, I hate fishing, but when I took this role, that was already on the wall. And if it comes down, the whole wall comes down. So I moved my desk. It used to be on the other side because obviously the last person in this role liked to look at that fish. I have it over here so that I don't have to look at that fish. That'll, those types of stories, and that starts to build that starts to build a relationship that's beyond just the business side of it. So try and get personal. They may have a series of pictures, and you might ask, is that your children, your grandchildren, those sorts of things. And then you can move into the discussions around their business. And then you want to start talking about things like, what are you presently doing in sponsorship? What do you like in sponsorship? What isn't working? What is working? So I saw that you're a title sponsor of such and such a golf tournament. How did you get into that? What was the reasoning behind it? All those types of questions about their business and how it's operating. So that's really the first of the discovery sessions. Maria? And you're on mute, just so you know.
Thank you very much. I tend to have a list of discovery questions that I like to look at prior to getting on a call. I'll usually cherry pick a few of them because you can get thrown by someone who really doesn't want to be on a call with you, or you can get distracted. And so I typically have a list of a few questions, but ultimately my goal on every discovery call is to book the next call. And the reason for that is if they'll take the next call, they're interested. And my goal is to have a protracted conversation where we ideate over and over and over again until we reach the objective that the client or the prospect is looking to achieve. I very rarely bring notes. And just like you were saying, I basically make it very conversational with the goal outcome of booking the next call.
When I first started in this industry, I remember it was back in the days, a lot of people on this call probably take their laptop in and open it up and take notes on a laptop. No. I used to, and still do, I handwrite everything, but I learned at a very early age in this career that I was sitting in front of somebody that was pretty powerful and important. And I thought I was just going into this discovery session to have a conversation. And he said, did you not bring a pen? Did you not bring paper? And I said, no, I just came to talk and learn. And he said, well, then we can reschedule the meeting when you can be bothered to bring a pen and paper, because what I'm going to tell you, you need to write down. So since then, I've always continued to take notes, and I've always asked, you always need to say, is it okay if I take notes? And back in those days, it was like a folder. And so I had the foolscap page over here. And on the other side, I had a series, like you said, Maria, of questions. And eventually I memorized all those questions. But for the first 6 months in the business, I would look over at them and I would say what my next question is and knew what it was, but it was conversational. And I didn't reference this earlier, and I should have, and I know Maria's reading this right now, but In Reality Check, Straight to Talk About Sponsorship Marketing, there is a chapter on discovery sessions, and it is got a list of a bunch of questions you can ask. So, and that's, you know, I mean, that's only the starting point, and it's where that conversation flows.
Well, and I think, you know, let's get back to the topic at hand, the recession proofing. So I think that the traditional questions kind of need to be tweaked, because I think there needs to be some acknowledgement that we are in lean times, and I find myself more and more being prepared to talk about things like flexibility clauses and discounting and downsizing and adding value. And so those are things that I typically don't have in my discovery, but I'm finding that I have to integrate that to help my prospect understand that from the get-go, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. Let's figure out how to do it. What do we need to do? You know, what do we need to do to renew? What do we need to do to move forward? And it sort of disarms them, and then it gets them talking about their challenges. And it's been a very effective way for me to uncover the challenges that the particular person I'm talking to is facing.
And I agree 100%, because when you tweak those traditional discovery questions to fit the scenario, whether it's a bull market, whether it's a recession potential, whether it's COVID, I don't care, but it is fine tuning them. And when you take a look at it, it's the research you need to do if you're going in to talk. And I'm just going to use Mattamy Homes, for example. You know, big developer, big builder across North America, in most major centers in Canada and multiple centers in the United States. When you stop, take a look at it, you know, do the research, you'll find out that that they are operating, they're down by 63% over the same time last year. So that question might be, hey, you know, there's been a dramatic drop. You're doing 2/3, you're doing only about 1/3 of the building that you did, you know, same time last year, which there was a boom during the tail end of COVID. And how is that affecting your business? How is that? Are you doing layoffs? How is that affecting your marketing? How's it? So you fine tune that question about how are you marketing to showing that you have some knowledge about their business, and at the same time being able to recognize that anybody that's business is down by 63%, they're going to have some impact on their marketing budget.
Well, let me give you an example on the flip side for my cause folks. Yep. This just happened yesterday. I had reached out to someone that I really wanted to work with, and he says, look, I've spent $25,000 this quarter. 25% of my business happens in Q4, and I'm super busy, but the opportunity with the earned and paid media for this activation was huge. I said, you just need to hear me out for a moment. Long and short of it, I extended payment terms, and it was a nonprofit activation. And the result was, not only did they give us money, but they pledged the nonprofit as beneficiary for all of their events in Q1 and 2, and goodwill. And so, you know, that's the opposite example, but it does show the power of discovery. I had to listen to what this guy had to say. It's not that he didn't want to talk to me. He'd spent his money for Q4 and he's busy, but we still got to pay for it.
I want to talk about that one too, because I think the example you gave has absolutely nothing to do with the recession. It has to do with his business cycles.
Right.
And and Q4 is his busy time, but that will help in a recession, exactly what you described, payment terms or changes. And I'll give you a couple of examples that we've used recently. But when you stop to look at it, that's something we should be doing anyway. Yeah. So you did it regarding cycles of business. It had nothing to do with a recession, but we can use that same philosophy when we get into a recession. But those terms might be, you know, I was just working with an organization who has a massive, or not a massive, but has a walk every year. They're a cause, they're a health cause, and they do a walk, and it's not a big national organization. It is a national organization, but they're not, you know, the Canadian Cancer Society or the CIBC Run for Cancer or any of that type of thing. They're smaller scale. and they're having trouble with pushback on some of the prospects saying, you know what, $2,000 for a sponsorship is too much, or $5,000 is too much. And I said, it depends on how you present that. If you know that that's the issue, then let's start looking at it and going, okay, if I say it's $2,000 and it's a small retail business, that might be too much money in their mind. But if I rephrase that and say, you know what, would you be willing to spend $5 or $6 a day towards this marketing? And if we did that, would that work for you? Yeah, I'm okay with spending $6 a day. Great. $5.50 times 365 comes right in around $2,000. You just sold them on the premise that it's $5 or $6 a day, not $2,000 for this event. And you bill that out over 6 months or 12 months, rather than just a $2,000 hit, because that might be too much for them. Or I don't care, use 20,000 or use 50,000.
And you know, Brent, that we are valuation geeks, right? So that's for those of you that don't do valuation or media monitoring, you know, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. But when you have done your valuation and you have earned and paid, you know, you can argue pretty effectively that they're getting a good deal.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about the good deal part. I'm talking about rephrasing the dollar value. It's still $2,000, but you know, the car dealers have done this the best. I mean, car dealers now don't have to do anything because there's no cars, so they can just keep increasing their prices. And if you notice, there's no $12,000 cash back if you buy this week, and there's no 0% financing anymore because they don't need to. But if you go back to pre-pandemic, they didn't talk about a $60,000 car. They talked about a car that was only $189 a week to purchase, because Joe or Sally Smith can say $189 works for me. I can eat out less. I can do this. I can do that. I can afford $189 a week, but I could never afford $60,000. I'm sorry, but it's the same number.
Yeah.
So when you're diving into those conversations about where marketing dollars are being placed and how people are allocating, those investments, you start diving into, where they're spending in social or programmatic, and looking at the value and the ROI sponsorship could provide relative to those.
Right.
It really depends on who I'm talking to. But at the end, probably I would say that those conversations don't happen till the third or fourth meeting. I would have to say. And then those conversations, then you take a deeper dive there. But I think Brent would probably agree with me. I'm so, in particular on the cause side, I'm so invested in finding out what they have that is sponsorable or saleable when I'm talking to causes, for example, that I don't get into the weeds at that initially at all. No.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, it's those early discovery sessions, you don't want to be diving into those details. Most people want a conversation, not a presentation, and we watch too often an organization, a property, pitching all their data at the front end. This is why you should be here. Here's the ROI somebody else is getting, and those sorts of things. You need to focus on the core of the business, what they're trying to achieve, what their goals are, and ask them where their ROI is. Oh, so you do a lot of earned media valuation. How do you value that on the earned media versus the unearned media? Or what are your expectations for earned or unearned media? And get that information from them. Then if you know you can't deliver on that, you need to be front and center and say, we can't deliver what your expectations are on earned and unearned media, but here's where we can actually help you, because we can over deliver on database development or something like that they've indicated is important to them. So go ahead.
Sorry. Well, and I really caution the charities and the nonprofits on the call. One of the biggest mistakes I see over and over again is going into these meetings with your mission lenses on, and your passion about your mission is great, but I'm very fond of having this discussion. If someone's philanthropic, you take their money, you say thank you. If someone is a corporate partner, you have a reciprocal agreement, you say thank you. Cash sponsorship requires you deliver on audience and value and fulfill. So there's an obligation. You have to be careful. Sorry.
Like, coming back, and the cost to acquire is an important number. So, and I don't care whether you're a cause or a pro sports team, you need to know from that business, what do they pay to get a new customer? Yeah. And if we know what that number is, then we can help them. So we've got a client, and they also have a walk or a run, and they have a partner in there that is one of the packaged food products, that you order your 6 meals for the week, and it comes in a box, and you've got everything, you're ready to go. Well, their acquisition price is something like $225 to acquire a new customer. It costs them on average $225. So that's a crossover on their marketing, their television, their social, their digital, the onloading, all of the administration costs, everything comes to $225. This property, through their run and their walk, was able to deliver a close to the number of expectations of new signups that they wanted, of which after 6 months, those signups were still 90% there. So it wasn't a one-time wonder. They were still there 6 months later, and that was how the evaluation was to work. But the acquisition cost was about $175. So that business was saving $50 per acquisition cost. This is a small organization. They are not meeting the goals and objectives of the earned and unearned media that their partner was hoping to have. But when you can deliver on something where you're $50 below their average acquisition cost, it works. And as we go into a recession, those acquisition costs are still going to be there, and they could go up. So they need to, and what most people do, and I'm sure this is probably in your list of questions, Brad, but companies during recessions and during downturns, the first thing they cut typically is budgets. And if you're not for profit or charity, the first thing they cut is development officers, because we can't afford to have people out there asking for money. We just need the money, but we can't afford to pay anybody. We watched that during COVID and elsewhere. But the marketing becomes a big cut. So how do you cut marketing? And then all of a sudden, your cost to acquire is going to go up, and they don't get that. And we also know from the statistics, if we go all the way back to the 80s, through the recession in 2008, the recession in late 90s, and we look at each one of those who invested continued to spend the same amount of money in a marketing capacity, which includes sponsorship. In a marketing capacity, those that continued to spend what they were prior to the recession saw an incremental increase when the market returned, an incremental increase of somewhere in 2 digits. And if they increased their budget during that recessionary period, they were seeing 3-digit growth. So that's like over 100% growth or expected growth when the market returned. And those that cut their budgets were typically seeing, when the market returned, their growth factor tended to be less than 10%. So if you can show people why they need to continue to invest for tomorrow, rather than just looking at the budget for today, then you will have sponsorship dollars available to you during a recessionary period.
So let me ask you, Brent, as a colleague, how important are the metrics now, and amping up those, capturing activity at events and the like? How important do you think that's going to become? Think it's going to become more increasingly important?
So repeat that for me, Maria.
So do you think that measurement of activity and engagement is going to become increasingly important for sales? for sponsorship sales?
Yeah, so I think measurement of more than just activity and engagement, it's got to go beyond that. It's got to go right into the sales. So if you look at that example I gave, it wasn't just how many people downloaded their app or how many people took the free meal, right? It was how many people were there 6 months later. And because that becomes important. And what we're seeing in the marketplace is a huge shift to, we as an organization, we need to acquire data. We need to know who these people are that are coming to this walk. Or we need people who's sitting in that hockey seat at the stadium. We need to see who those people are, and we need to be able to reach them. And you as a not-for-profit, or you as a sports team, or you as a concert festival, you know, something like that, you can't give us your databases, even though you have all that information. It's illegal for you to give us those databases. So we need to find a way, whether it's through QR codes, whether it's through augmented reality opportunities. And that way, the data is there and it's trackable, and that's of value. And I think that that's the type of tracking that's going to be necessary. Would you agree, or is there something else?
No. I absolutely agree. That's what I just wanted to make sure that we address that on this call, because I'm sure that many of the folks on the call are wondering, you know, what can I do at event? You know, what kinds of investments do I need to be thinking of beyond earned and paid media and social? You know, what can I do to make my offering, you know, better next year or in subsequent years? Yeah.
And I think to Brent's point, the value of that data is only going up, because as Google changes the way that cookies are being tracked, are no longer going to be tracked, the changes to Apple's tracking and what's gone on in the UK, or well, in Europe with GDPR, that direct data of who the audience is going to become harder to find and harder for brands to connect to. I think there's an opportunity that people aren't exploring in sponsorship for that.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much technology out there to look at. Like if we look at it, you take something. We all learned how to use QR codes during COVID, because if we went into a restaurant, the only way we could look at a menu is if we track the QR code and wow, pops up the menu and I can pick and choose, right? So we were all trained during COVID how to use QR codes. And just for those that are on the call, I mean, QR codes were actually launched, and we identified them as a huge opportunity for sponsorship back at the Western Sponsorship Congress in, I think it was 2008 or 2009, and we focused on them. And I mean, that was, 15 years ago, right? And they fell off, but they came back. And but what most organizations do now, if they've got a QR code that they put on a banner that's up at your event, or on a piece of paper on a seat at a gala dinner, or on a screen, or at a silent auction, or any of those types of things, that QR code typically, because no offense to brands, but most of these brands are just, they don't understand the technology. So where do they have that QR code go? They have the QR code land on their homepage of their website. The hell do I want to be on their homepage of their website for? There's no interaction there. There's no engagement. It's not going to do anything. I'm just leaving. But if that QR code takes me to a purchase page, if that's what we've engaged over, or it takes me to a gamification page, or it may take me to an augmented reality page where, I'm all excited. I'm at a NASCAR event, and we're sponsors of a driver, and this could be NASCAR, but I mean, it could be at Spruce Meadows, it could be at a tennis tournament, it could be at whatever. And up until this point prior, the only way that you could put elements on over your head and things like that were on the apps, on whether it was TikTok, or whether it was Instagram, and be able to dress up, and what's the term? It's at the tip of my tongue.
Snapchat? You're talking Snapchat?
The filters.
Pardon me? Filters, yeah. I mean, you throw a filter on somebody. Well, now you don't have to have those apps for filters. I mean, you can do it through augmented reality. So if I'm a big fan of a NASCAR driver or something local, I can put on the helmet and then I can save it. So it's my face inside that driver's helmet that's recognized, or sitting on a horse at Spruce Meadows, or any of these types of things. And in those experiences that occur, I can make them that augmented reality scenario, and then I can share it with all my friends and family and do it that way. So, and these aren't really expensive opportunities. So you can, there's a ton of ways to use QR codes. Sorry, I get all excited about it.
I think that really comes down to, as Maria was talking earlier, about knowing what you've got in your inventory and being able to build that out, because there are new elements that you might have that are low cost to implement and maybe really exciting to a brand to implement on. And it's having that flexibility and, I guess the conversational wherewithal that when you're talking with somebody, you start realizing that this is something that they would buy into.
But I have to tell you, I go back to my discovery is key in 23 phrase that I want everyone to embrace, because I was in a meeting. I think one of my colleagues that was in that meeting might be on this call. And I tell the story. We went into a car dealership. We were sure we could get them leads and butts and seats and they could convert them. And when we mentioned that this wonderful activation, these activation ideas that we brought to the party, their eyes glazed over and they all looked at me and said, well, we don't want butts and seats. And we're like, well, why? You're a car dealership. And the response was, we don't have any cars. What we want is an event with caviar. We want to get people to have a few sips of champagne, participate in a highbrow event. And when they do go to make a purchasing decision, think of us and not go to our competitor. So again,
I want to jump in on that. What a perfect opportunity to use augmented reality. So if it is a caviar event, you can click your QR code and let's say it's a Ford dealer. And I'm not talking Maseratis here. I'm talking a Ford dealer, right? And the cars that they want to sell are the new Broncos, right? And so you can actually climb into that car and you can adjust the sound on the radio and you can do all these sorts of things. You don't need a virtual reality headset. This is all augmented reality, and you can change it so they can still put the bum in the seat, but they can create that experience next to the caviar table.
Well, and I'll tell you another funny story. All of you on the call should check out BizBash when you have to ideate activations and you get stuck, because they have some good activations on there. But there was a small, tiny little event, like many of the nonprofits on the call probably hold, I think with 200 influencers in Los Angeles. And they had a Bronco because Ford, I think it was Ford was the title. And do you know what they did? They did something completely grassroots. This is just the other end of the spectrum. They put a fortune teller in the Bronco. Everybody at that party got in that car to have their fortune read. So, there are two sides of the aisle, but again, you have to get creative. That's what we do. And that's what we sell.
Brad, if it's okay, I want to jump back to something Maria said. And it was with the client that had Q4 and that was their big period. And when I start looking about going and you, Maria, you made the reference to this and the recession coming up and all that sort of stuff, but I jumped back and said, well, really, that's not even a recession type scenario. That's everyday scenario. In your discovery, understand when their busy season is, when their cash flow is, when they need to do a whole bunch of stuff. And then you build out the payment schedule accordingly, right? But the other side is that we're probably also going to go into a lot of scenarios and where somebody says, we were spending $50,000 a year, we were spending $10,000 a year, and we can't do that anymore. Our budgets are cut. We've got $8,000 to spend, or we don't have any money this year, but our budgets are coming back next year, or whatever it is. That's good. Just understand it and learn through, as you said, discoveries are key in 23. And when we start to look at that, we said to a client the other day that they had a prospect, and the prospect says, I can't start till 24. I have no budget for 23. Well, and they only want to do a 1 year. So why don't we do a 3-year deal? We'll give you a 4th year for free. We'll take you through 23 at no cost, and you sign a 3-year deal on top of that. So you're getting 4 years for the price of 3, or that you sign a 3.
Rate protection is a great tactic this time with this recession fear.
Yep. So you get you do not get an escalator each year. It's the same price. It's the same 20,000 a year for 3 years. But alternatively, and we just did this with a naming right with a client, the sponsor wanted only a 5-year deal and the property wanted a 10-year deal. So they said, we'll sign for the brand said, we'll sign for 5 years and then we'll make a decision. Well, here's how it works. If you want to do that, we'll let you do that, but understand that there will be an escalator of 3% or 2.5% per year. So at the end of 5 years, if you decide to come back, you're probably talking about a 17 to 22% increase 5 years later. Or you can sign a deal that's actually a contract that says you're in for 5 years with a 5-year option, and we will guarantee the price for an additional 5 years because we want you for 10. And then they're more likely to be obligated to do that than if their contract is only 5 years and there's no option to renew. So there's a bunch of tactics like that, especially going into a recession. And sometimes it's cash flow. It's, you know what, you can pay us during July, August, and September when you're flush, and it's still, you know, it's still $24,000 a year, but instead of it being a lump sum $24,000 or a $2,000 a month for every month of the year, you know what it is? It's $8,000 a month for July, August, and September when you're flush with cash. And that makes it easier for them to flow.
I mean, I cut that deal yesterday, and everyone wins, right? The nonprofit wins, they win, there's goodwill. Yeah. Yeah, it's important to be very, very flexible if you have the latitude to do that. And I think some of the nonprofits struggle with that because they go back to their boards and they're getting beaten on because they didn't get the cash up front. So it's important discussions to have internally as well.
And we've had a lot of conversation about, you know, sort of protecting the dollars you've got right now. And you know, Sean sent us a question up front. You know, is there opportunity to value add or upsell? You know, are there ways in this to actually, you know, increase your revenue and your engagement with partners?
Absolutely. You know, the more you discover what they are trying to achieve or what their pain points are, what their struggles are, and to the extent that you can support that, you bet. Absolutely. It's all about doing a lot of active listening and not a lot of talking about what you're trying to pitch. I mean, it's really, you have, you know, my favorite thing to talk about other than causes is discovery, because you don't have to have any anxiety going into any of these meetings if you are prepared to listen and listen to what they're trying to achieve, and then try to match what you have to what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, it's super fun. It's super easy. And you know, you're on a treasure hunt. You need to be prescriptive, but you can't be prescriptive if you're not doing diagnostics, right? It doesn't work. Sorry, I'm preaching. Apologize.
Brent's on mute.
I think the key is, and you nailed it, is that we have to do active listening. We all have a problem, or tend to have a problem, that we listen to respond. So we're listening to be able to say, yeah, we can do that. No, we can't do that. Or I've got an idea, because we're listening to be able to respond to people. But what we have to do is start listening to learn. So that by listening to learn, you're listening to understand, and you may not have a response for them. I don't have a response right now because it's more important I get this down and I understand what you're saying. And so maybe you repeat what they said more often than give them an answer or a brilliant solution to something. But you need to learn to listen, to learn, rather than to listen to respond.
Yep. And it's I had a recent name and word mark prospect, and it came to fruition. The other thing that's so important is to understand, like you had pointed out before, understand their business objectives. This particular company is a solar company. And they were aligning with the cause in Q4 simply for awareness, mission support, because on the West Coast of the United States, I'm sure in Canada as well, when there's no sun, nobody's thinking about solar, right? So their objectives for Q4 based on their business were completely different from what their business objectives and their budget when it's hot. So, these are nuances that are worth their weight in gold if you are able to elicit them from the people that you're talking to, and you have a solution in your sponsor, asset pool to help them with that. So it's super important.
Brad, we've talked a lot here, the two of us. Have you got any more questions?
I've got a number of questions, and flipping the seat from a brand perspective. Are you seeing brands that are collaborating with one another on partnerships, and are they worthwhile? Find ways to augment the investment, but at a lower price for each of the partners.
We're seeing quite a bit of it, but I mean, again, not from we want to augment, we're going into a recession, we need to find a partner to help us with this. But if you look at Canada Games coming up in PEI in February, that's Prince Edward Island, which is on the east coast of Canada for those that are calling in from the States. But and the Canada Games is like a mini Olympics. It's a multi-sport Canadian athlete exhibition. And so the Winter Games are in PEI in February, and they have got several of their partners are actually collaborating on promotional elements. So one of them is the linkage between transportation services, so the busing system, SMT, and Irving Oil, and they're using Cavendish farms and potatoes, which is tying back into a lot of the restaurants that are partners. So McCain's isn't in that one, even though they make more French fries, but Cavendish is because they're a PEI product. So we're seeing a lot of those sorts of things where it's collaborative because it works and it helps both parties. So again, coming back to not how to recession-proof necessarily your organization, but how to actually collaborate effectively in good times or bad.
Yeah, I'm seeing quite a bit of that as well on my side here. Yep.
And are you seeing different approaches in the American market versus the Canadian market for how people are approaching this whole scenario of recession?
No, I'm not. I'm seeing pretty much exactly the same thing that Brent has talked about, even to his point just now about the collaboration. But part of my background has been in auto racing, and that's been a staple way of doing business for a really long time in that area. So, and
we don't operate in the States, so it's hard for me to compare. But basically, what Maria's talking about, I agree. I mean, we're both preaching the same message, and it's about doing discoveries, building relationships, deepening your relationships. The stronger those are, the better foolproof you will, or recession-proof you will be going into a recession.
And brands, I mean, we know that brands pivot quarterly regardless, right? But even a 15-degree pivot, you can be completely off and you're done. Oh, so sorry. And you're done. And so why take that risk? It's not worth it. That's why, the whole discovery thing is your communications tactics to recession-proof your sponsorship have to be heightened. You need to communicate more and often and stay abreast of what those pivoting challenges are and what you can do to support that.
And that communication can't just be, let's go for lunch. It needs to be, hey, I saw this in the marketplace. Provide every single time you reach out to a prospect, especially in tough times, you need to give them some value. So they will open up your email or read your DM or respond if they need to, or you want them to. Give them value in every engagement you have. Maria looks at the term stewardship. We just refer to it, at least I do, as fulfillment. I use stewardship specifically in the philanthropic side, and then in the corporate marketing side, it's fulfillment. And that fulfillment process needs to be enacted, but also it's just, you saw that they just gave money to another cause, then let's thank them for it. Let's reach out and stay engaged so they know that we're actually on top of it. Like, how many of your sponsors do you actually follow on 3 to 4 different channels of social media so that you can know exactly what they're posting at any given time, and therefore be able to jump on and send a quick email or a DM to say, hey, that's really cool, the launch of that new product. I love that. Not, hey, how can we get more money out of you? Or, hey, is it, it's time to renew. It's about deepening that relationship. Every piece of communication needs to have value to your partner.
And, the one thing we haven't talked about is, what about the discussions in particular for renewals or upsells where you assure your sponsor partner that the cutbacks haven't affected you and that you will be able to fulfill?
Yeah.
That's going to be an important conversation to have as well.
Well, and I think there's an element we haven't touched on, it, which is the, a lot of people on the call, they've got somebody they got to report into, and that person's got a specific view about, what's going on and how, preconceived notions of where brands are going to be. Do you do much coaching up in order to assist with those conversations?
Every day. Every single day. And I have to be careful in case any of my colleagues are on the call, but I get challenged every day because they have a different perspective. The VP of marketing and communications, or the community relations people, or the development people, or people on the program side, at least on the cost side, they think I'm nuts. Why are you accepting payment terms? Well, because if their budget doesn't coincide with our request, do you want to accept the pledge, or do you want to walk away and have zero? So, it's an important conversation to have, and it's a double-edged sword, but you have to educate the other side of the fence. You have to give some rationale for why you are doing this, and that ultimately it will benefit the organization.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with like zoos and arts organizations who tend to, for rightfully so, to be way more opposed to sponsorship from an operations perspective. Because the sponsorship persons will always say, yeah, we can bring the giraffe down to your store opening, no problem at all. And go talk to the animal care people. That ain't happening, right? Or, yeah, no problem. We can rewrite the script for the play we're putting on the stage, and yeah, we'll use your business in there instead of Oliver Twist's business, right? We're gonna rewrite Oliver Twist to make it look like your business. So the end result is that there's certain things you can't do, and that's why those other departments push back so much. And that, I always say, that's because we focus all our effort on relationships between us and the partner, and we fail to build relationships internally within our own organizations. And the more that we can, exactly what Maria said, the more we can educate, and we do a lot of that where our clients, included in their contract, will be, that we're going to do 4 lunch and learns for 4 different major departments within the organization. What is sponsorship? How does it affect their specific department? We're doing that for a municipality right now, because you know what? Those are the people that own the assets. Everything that Maria's
Correct.
selling, or our clients are selling, or anybody on this call is selling. Typically, if you're in development or you're in sponsorship, you don't own those assets. The other departments within the organization own the assets, whether it's a communications department owns the social media, or the animal care people own access to the animals, or the transportation people are responsible for the vehicles that are going to get deckled or not get deckled. You don't own the assets. Everybody else owns the assets. So you need to make sure that they're on board, and they need to be educated to understand. And as we go into a recession, they're going to be even more critically pushing back because they can't afford to do extra things. We've got one zoo where that zoo has increased the number of behind the scenes events where large donors or corporate partners can bring 3 to 4 people in to go and feed the rhino or feed the giraffe or whatever it is, and have an amazing behind the scene experience. Well, those number of behind the scenes experiences, take out the years that the zoo was closed during COVID, but you go 2018, 2019, 2021, 2022, 21, 22 are up almost 60% over 2018 and 2019 for behind the scenes. There's no additional budget for animal care people. There's no additional budget for extra staff. So they're doing, almost twice as many behind the scenes experiences and getting no money for it. So what does that mean? They have to hire more employees, or they have to make their employees work longer in those departments, which is good reason to hate sponsorship, right?
Or they say no, or they just
say
no.
Or to say no. But as soon as you say no, then you can't make that money, right?
Right. Yep. No, I live that every day, and I'm sure many of the nonprofits on the call live that every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really great information here, and just thinking about, Terry had put out a question, is the economy the best indicator for willingness to spend? And I'm really getting the impression that, knowing that a recession is typically, 9 to 24 months, everything's going to come out eventually. So does it really change your format of what you're doing, or should you just be doing things better the way you should have always been doing them?
Well, I think you have to consider that businesses are going to, Brent has said this a couple times on this call, businesses still have to make money. And, you need to know who your audience is. And to the extent that you can deliver on audience and value, you're going to have a leg up. But you have to be prepared to argue for that effectively. You have to know what you got, and you have to be able to deliver. So I don't know if maybe I didn't answer the question, but I really think it's more tactical than it is based on the economy per se. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not sure an economy is a predictor of the willingness to spend, for the simple reason that it's a reactive approach, and most good sponsors aren't reactive, they're planned. So when we look at a downturn in the economy or an increase in the economy, when we're in a bull market, we're already into it. It's too late. So by the time we're into a recession, it's too late to say that we're going to see decreases. If you go talk to your investment advisor, they're probably the best people to tell you where stuff's going, because the stock market actually leads the economy by a period of approximately 6 or 12 months. What's happening in the stock market today will tell you where your money's going to be in 6 months. So we're better off not looking at the economy of today, but we're looking at the economy of the future. That's probably the best way to know where you're going. And therefore, coming back to your question, Brad, about is it a good indicator? It's not a great indicator, because there are lots of companies that are going to do well. So we go into a recession, Walmart's going to make a lot of money. So are dollar stores, so are all of those. So not everybody is affected by a recession on a negative side. For those, when it's a boom market, Walmart doesn't do as well. I'm sorry, but that's just a reality. So you have to pinpoint your businesses, and I hate this word, but you may need to pivot on who you're talking to in a bull market or a recession. So the end result is that talk to the people that have money.
And I think that's, a really good summary. And, some of the takeaways that I've got from this is it's all about communication. And, we should be communicating with our partners on an ongoing basis. And this just kind of sharpens the need on being able to do that and reflecting on how we approach those conversations. Definitely understanding the data that you've got organizationally, being able to showcase that. And then the last piece is flexibility. It's kind of my 3 takeaways from what you've provided, and it's been a fantastic overview. Thank you so much, Brent and Maria, for joining this and sharing your insights. Maria, I think you have a couple sessions you've got coming up, don't you?
Well, yeah, I'm just I'm ideating and thinking about supporting my nonprofits, helping them to turn their passion into sales acumen. So I'll be hosting a couple of sessions on that. Yeah, I'm noodling that. That's my new passion project for myself.
And I'm happy to share that information out with the people on the call if they're interested. And as well, just a reminder, we're doing our next session January 27th with Sean Coakley from T1, looking at the metaverse and everything that's involved in that, trying to understand where sponsorship can fit into it. And probably getting a better understanding of what the metaverse is the first piece. But information will be coming to register for that. Really appreciate everybody's time today, and thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.